Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at two really pressing global issues that are also deeply felt right in our own communities: the migrant crisis and the homelessness crisis.
That's right.
We've got this community blog post debating the migrant versus homeless crisis, a community perspective. It really gets into the details of these challenges,
hmm
where they overlap, where they're different, and how communities are, well, trying to figure things out.
Yeah, trying to find a path forward.
Exactly. So our goal in this deep dive is to pull out the key insights from this piece, hopefully giving you a clearer, maybe more nuanced view of what's going on.
And what's really interesting about this blog post is its central idea that these two crises, which we often talk about separately, actually have some pretty significant connections. And understanding those links is, well, it's vital if we actually want to come up with effective responses. It's not really about saying one is more important, but seeing the shared human side of it all.
Okay, let's start with the migrant crisis then. The blog post sort of frames it as this large-scale movement of people, right? Moving away from home because of some really tough situations.
Yeah, incredibly difficult circumstances, conflict, persecution, economic collapse, even environmental disasters. It paints a picture of people just urgently needing safety, needing stability.
And thinking about why people move, the blog post mentioned some pretty striking numbers.
It did. On the conflict side, that UN statistic, something like 28 million people forcibly displaced by conflict by the end of 2021, it's a huge number.
Really puts it in perspective.
It does. And the blog mentions instability in places like the Middle East, parts of Africa.
Yeah.
It's still forcing huge numbers of people out of their homes.
And it's not just physical conflict driving it, is it? The economic piece seems just as, maybe even more powerful sometimes.
Absolutely. The Post uses Venezuela as a key example. You see how hyperinflation, total economic breakdown leads to this massive emigration.
People looking for basic things, jobs, reuniting with family.
Exactly. Just trying to survive, essentially. It shows how economic desperation can be that primary push factor.
Did the Post get into any sort of ripple effects of that economic collapse
Yeah.
beyond just the immediate job loss?
That's a good question. It touched on how when the economy falls apart, the social support systems within a country often do too.
Ah, right. The safety nets disappear.
Precisely. So even people who might have been okay before suddenly find themselves with nothing to fall back on. Emigration becomes, well, a survival strategy.
And then there's the environmental angle, which the blog post highlighted too. Climate migrants, that term feels increasingly relevant.
Definitely. The International Organization for Migration is clear on this. Natural disasters, big droughts, major floods that are displacing huge numbers of people.
So it's this intersection, isn't it? Environmental damage hitting areas that might already be vulnerable.
Exactly. And it's not always a sudden thing, like a hurricane. Sometimes it's slower, like land degrading over time, making farming impossible. Migration becomes the only option left.
The blog post also mentioned immigration policies and, how public attitudes play a role once migrants actually arrive somewhere new. That reception sounds like it can vary a lot.
Oh, massively. National policies can either create pathways for people to integrate, or they can put up huge roadblocks, create really unstable living situations.
And public opinion.
Public opinion is huge. It's often shaped by media, by political talk, and it really affects how welcoming a community is, how much support migrants actually receive.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the homelessness crisis. The blog defines this as simply lacking stable, safe housing. Sounds straightforward.
But the reasons behind it are anything but simple. Very complex, actually.
Right. The blog post pointed to a few key factors.
It did. Mental health issues came up as significant. Things like depression, anxiety, substance use. They can make it incredibly hard to find and keep a job. Or stable housing.
It becomes a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Totally. The stress of being homeless can make existing mental health issues worse, and poor mental health makes it harder to get out of homelessness.
And then the economic instability link. Can't ignore that.
No way. Job loss, not earning enough, even with a job. And this massive gap we keep seeing between wages and housing costs, especially in cities, it's pushing people over the edge.
It really makes you think how precarious things are for a lot of people. Did the blog offer specifics on which economic factors were hitting hardest in the community they looked at?
Yeah, it pointed to wages for low and middle income folks just not keeping up, while housing costs are skyrocketing. That combination is just brutal.
So even working people?
Even people with jobs can't afford rent in many places. It's a critical problem.
And tied to that, the blog mentioned the lack of affordable housing overall, just not enough supply.
Exactly. The supply of housing that people on lower incomes can actually afford hasn't kept pace with the need at all.
So you get scarcity.
You get scarcity. And without enough public resources to fill that gap, homelessness becomes, well, almost inevitable for some people facing hardship.
The Post noted that how society and government respond to homelessness varies and often struggles with things like funding, coordination. It sounds like finding solutions is tough.
It really is. Effective responses need everyone pulling together: government, nonprofits, community groups, and it needs sustained funding, not just for emergencies, but to tackle those deeper systemic issues.
Okay, so we've looked at both crises through the lens of this blog post. Now let's get into the comparison. What did the post say about how these situations overlap and how they differ?
A really crucial point the blog made was identifying shared roots: poverty, severe economic hardship. These are fundamental issues affecting both groups.
Right, whether you're a migrant seeking refuge or someone local who's lost their housing.
Exactly. That lack of resources impacts everything: healthcare access, finding work, getting social support. It's a common struggle.
And the blog also brought up social stigma. That seems to hit both groups hard.
Oh, definitely. Negative stereotypes, marginalization, a lack of empathy. It affects both migrants and people experiencing homelessness. The Post talked about how fear-based narratives often dominate the conversation.
Did it give examples of how that stigma plays out, like in practical terms?
Yes, it mentioned discrimination in housing and jobs, makes it even tougher for people to get back on their feet. And it can weaken public support for helpful programs and policies, too.
But the blog also pointed out key differences in their experiences, right?
Yes, that's important, too. Migrants are often displaced by external forces, conflict, disaster, seeking safety in a whole new country.
Whereas people experiencing homelessness often still have local connections.
Right, they might have local ties, family nearby, but their instability comes from maybe job loss, health issues, family breakdown, more localized triggers, often.
That distinction feels important for how you try to help.
Absolutely. While needs might overlap, the specific journey and the kind of support that's most effective can be quite different for these two groups.
Now, the blog dug into community perspectives, the reactions on the ground. And it wasn't just one single view, was it?
Not at all. It showed a real mix. You had like a local business owner worried about homelessness impacting tourism and their business. That's one real concern.
Understandable from their perspective.
Then you have a migrant assistance nonprofit highlighting the really urgent needs of people just arriving needing everything.
And then the homeless shelter volunteer feeling like their clients are getting overlooked sometimes.
Exactly. That feeling of competition for scarce resources, for attention, it's a real tension.
And the blog mentioned a resident just witnessing families dealing with both poverty and displacement firsthand. That brings it home, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows the human complexity. These different views highlight the tough balancing act communities face: empathy versus resources versus practical management.
Which leads us nicely into policy and community solutions. The blog stressed needing a comprehensive approach. Collaboration is key.
Absolutely. Government, NGOs, the community itself, everyone needs to be involved. The blog suggested things like better programs for accessing housing and jobs for both groups.
And tailored support.
Yeah, tailored transitional housing programs were mentioned, ones that offer integrated support job training, maybe language classes for migrants, mental health resources for anyone who needs them, a more holistic view.
And it really seemed to champion community-driven ideas, mentorship, sharing local resources, that grassroots level.
Yes, that kind of local involvement can make a huge difference. It builds collective responsibility, can lead to really innovative solutions that fit the local context.
The blog pushed for more collaboration between organizations too, didn't it? Sharing resources, focusing on common needs.
That's right. Instead of silos, finding ways to work together, recognizing those shared vulnerabilities.
The blog also spent some time on the media's role in all this, how it shapes how we see these crises.
Which is so powerful, isn't it? The media narrative can either build understanding and empathy, or it can unfortunately just reinforce harmful stereotypes.
Yeah, selective reporting.
Selective reporting can really dehumanize migrants or paint people experiencing homelessness with this broad negative brush. That makes finding solutions much harder.
But the flip side, the blog noted, is positive stories. Human interest pieces can build compassion.
Exactly. Compare that to sensational headlines that just fuel fear. And now with social media, those narratives, good or bad, spread like wildfire.
So being critical media consumers is important here.
Essential. Understanding that landscape helps promote more informed, compassionate responses. seeking out diverse stories, humanizing stories.
Okay, finally, the blog brought in this vital humanitarian perspective, empathy, activism. The bottom line being dignity and respect.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. The blog gave examples of grassroots groups like food banks or shelters that help both migrants and the homeless. That shows real solidarity in action.
And activism, too, pushing for policy change.
Crucial. Advocating for things like affordable housing, better healthcare access, fair working conditions for migrants that drives the systemic change needed for more just communities.
So fostering that culture of empathy seems key to bridging the gap.
It really is. Seeing the connections, seeing the shared humanity, that's where communities can start building more effective, lasting solutions together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, looking back at this community blog post debating the migrant versus homeless crisis, a few things really stand out, don't they?
Definitely. The core message seems to be acknowledging those shared vulnerabilities, poverty, stigma affecting both groups.
Right, and moving beyond seeing them as completely separate issues competing for attention.
Exactly. And it really champions the role of community-led efforts, building understanding, delivering support in an integrated way. Collaboration is stressed again and again.
Between organizations, government, residents. Everyone has a part to play in providing resources and fostering that inclusivity.
And education, too. Fighting those harmful stereotypes, pushing for policies that offer equitable opportunities. It all comes back to recognizing our shared humanity.
The blog really suggests that unity and inclusivity are the keys to tackling these crises effectively, building a more compassionate society.
Which really brings up a final thought for you, our listener. What concrete steps could your community take? How could it foster more understanding, create more joined-up support for both migrants and those facing homelessness?
Maybe it's looking into local organizations already doing this work, seeing how you could get involved.
Or even just starting conversations, talking with people in your network, challenging assumptions, raising awareness. It all contributes to building that more inclusive community the blog envisions.